Good evening and thanks for staying with us. Welcome to our COVID-19 special program at this hour. My name is Ladi Akeredoluale. Here are the highlights. Federal government's laser focus now on community response as Health Minister warns against unauthorized treatment of COVID-19. Minister of Interior says state governments must report immigration activities in their states to the federal government. A movement of workers restricted in the United Arab Emirates. We begin in Abuja, where healthcare workers must adhere to government regulations and instructions to utilize personal protection equipment as the situation demands. Those are the words of the Minister of Health, Dr. Osagie Ehanire, following the death of a medical professional who died of COVID-19 in Lagos after treating an infected patient. Dr. Ehanire said healthcare workers should avoid private or secret management of people who have COVID-19 outside of accredited health facilities.
Use this opportunity to again strongly advise my colleagues in medical profession against secretly or privately managing people who have COVID-19 infection outside of accredited health facilities. We cannot afford to have avoidable morbidity and mortality. Private facilities must obtain accreditation in order to be allowed to treat this highly infectious disease. Practitioners engaging in unauthorized treatment of COVID-19 run the risk of being shut down, their hospitals being shut down for decontamination. This next phase of our strategy in the health sector, due to the available evidence of increasing community transmission in Nigeria, now focuses on community response rather than individual travelers and their contacts in society.
Dr. Osagie Ehanire, Minister of Health. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has also warned that people's movement in spite of the lockdown is one of the reasons there are cases of community spread of COVID-19. The coordinator of the task force, Dr. Sani Aliu, during today's briefing in Abuja, said the news of people being smuggled in trucks out of Lagos is particularly worrying. While Minister of Interior Rauf Aregbesola has asked those within the border communities to be vigilant and report any suspicious movements.
Let me seize this opportunity to admonish Nigerians living in our border communities in the states sharing borders with our West and Central African neighbors. And these states are Lagos, Ogun, Oyo, Kwara, Niger, Kebbi, Sokoto, Zamfara, Katsina, Jigawa, Yobe, Borno, Adamawa, Taraba, Benue, Cross River, and Akwa Ibom. I'm seizing this opportunity to admonish them to promptly report any illegal entry of anybody across our borders and alert the officers and men of the Nigeria Immigration Service. It is in our collective interest to prevent opportunistic entry of COVID-19 into Nigeria by any means. We, as a people and a nation, have sacrificed a lot of our time, energy, resources, and wealth as a people and a nation, that it is best to take the maximum advantage of the gains we are making on the containment of this virus by being alert to any movement at all across our border by anybody, except our own citizens, who even as well we must report to the officers and men of the Nigeria Immigration Service.
There is still no recommended medication for the treatment of the new coronavirus COVID-19, but health workers have been able to save many lives. Nigeria is working with the World Health Organization on the research for the treatment of the disease. The chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 says the federal government is working with researchers to do the needful in search of a cure for the disease.
This is a novel virus. Even from the place from where it originated, they are busy trying to lay their hands on possible vaccines or other drugs that can be used for the purposes of cure. We will do the needful in terms of a proper medical research to see if Nigeria can have a leeway or a headway in getting to the creation or invention of a vaccine or a combination of drugs that can be curative in dealing with the coronavirus. As of now, there is no cure that has been proven scientifically. There is no vaccine in the market that can be administered. All we are doing is to put in place the non-pharmaceutical initiative and the medical care that can be given to those that have been infected.
To take that issue a little bit further, I'm being joined in the studio now by Mr. Olushola Shofekun, who is a PhD holder and is a geneticist. Now, good evening. Am I right to call you Dr. Shofekun?
Exactly.
Indeed. First of all, what's your view of this pandemic, your general opinion about this COVID-19 and its breakout worldwide?
Well, in principle, it is real, although it is strange. Viruses have existed with animals and man, and they have co-evolved, typically without causing any problems. The transmission from that mutual existence to the very virulent state is a thing to be questioned, using all the principles of science. It's strange in its entirety and can only be solved by the back end of medicine, not medicine itself.
What do you mean by the back end?
Genomics, bioinformatics.
For those who are laymen, first of all, what does a geneticist do?
Well, we study traits, passage of traits. Why am I big? Why are you small? Why is your skin color dark and all that? And then we go further to determine to a large extent how this affects basic things about life. In some instances, we try to play God in small g, and we alter genomes, for our advantage. For instance, increasing yield in milk, for instance, in crops, making sure that plants that do not normally grow in Nigeria are grown in Nigeria, modifying either the environment or the plant to make sure that we can. Now,
in terms of COVID-19, COVID-19, how do you think the mutation, the evolution of this coronaviruses, we're told that a group of which COVID-19 is just the latest one we're seeing, how does it relate to this issue of genes and traits and attributes of human beings?
For a virus to change from living mutually with animals and then become disvirulent, then there must be some genetic change. There can be lateral gene transfers, there can be horizontal gene transfers within the virus group, between the virus group, between the virus and the animals with which it had been living all along. These are things that we have to typically look into at the level of the genes to determine what actually may have gone wrong. There is the third theory of a biowarfare, someone having engineered the virus to make it more virulent and all that. These are possibilities. But for now, there's no proof. So typically, we just stay with the science side of it.
Now, it's made a move to humans,
yes,
which is what has brought about the whole commotion that we're going through now.
Yes.
Could that also be explained by what you've just described as the alteration in one form or the other of its capacities?
Of course, it can be. alterations that can be natural, due to mutation, I said, due to horizontal gene transfers, due to lateral gene transfers within the virus group itself, between the virus group, and then between the virus and the animals with which it had lived all along.
Does this include humans?
Oh, of course, it's possible.
Okay. Now, in that kind of situation, how do you go about identifying what exactly has happened?
Well, Nigeria is currently trying through the Institute of Medical Research. So far, I think they have sequenced the genome of the first set of index groups.
Right.
The genome is small, about 32 megabases. It's on the gene bank already, waiting for approval and ascension number. This genome, I think, we shall have to compare with the viruses that we have in China, the one in Europe, the one in America. It must tell us something about the evolution of the virus itself. We must also look at what has changed to give this virulence to the virus.
Why is it virulence? Because you've used that word now about 5 times in this conversation.
The virus typically gets into you and you are asymptomatic. It dies out, typically, occasioned by the fact that you also have your viral component in your nasal area with which it can come in contact and then form capsids and it ceases to multiply. And then it dies out.
Is that something similar to or the same thing as what people are generally referring to as your body system fighting off external?
It's part of it. There's also the human immune cassette, a group of genes that are typically brought to fore when there is an infection. And their function is actually to make sure that the infection doesn't thrive. The white blood cells, are critical parts of this. And when a person is immunosuppressed, people treating several cancers and all that, and you are using drugs, organ transplants and all that, then you know your immunity is lowered, which typically means that you are more susceptible.
Now, how does our body traits, in terms of, oh, I'm big and this person is small, or what people started off at the very beginning of this crisis by saying, oh, it won't come to Africa because we have higher, more serious immune systems than others. How does that work with what you've just described now?
Looking at the trend, I'm not looking at any gazing ball. We're a bit more immune, summarily, than the Asians, the Americans, and the Europeans. And just like the sickling hemoglobin, for instance, confers some element of immunity against malaria. The buffy coat confers some element of immunity against malaria. Our exposure to various, plethora of viruses across time, to a large extent, has also conferred on us some element of immunity. That's the reason why the man in charge of the National Center for Disease Control has said with emphasis that in 90% of the cases, they didn't do anything special for these persons to get healed. These are things that you can check at genomic level to determine our cassette of the cassette of the immune system that determines when a person is infected, whether it gets symptoms or it becomes asymptomatic. Does he get healed? Does he die?
So at this stage now, what will you be advising? Because now we are on the second phase of a lockdown of the epicenters of this disease, as it were, now.
Yes.
What would you be advising, given all the background that you've given so far? What are we supposed to do? What should we use this time that people are more or less locked down where they are to find out and to determine?
Well, the masks are very important in cutting the cycle. I was in Europe up until the 20th of March. We were locked down. If you had to go out, you must be with your masks, so that even if you are infected, you do not infect others. That's very important. They must come almost free, so that people can have them. Yes, that's important. Once you cut the infection cycle, then the numbers begin to drop. That's one aspect of it. Several other aspects I've highlighted.
Please go ahead.
About 11 of them. One important thing, yes, is that we must check the complete virome of animals, porcupines, bats, shrews, pangolins, and all that. Because there are still viruses that are potentially more dangerous than the coronavirus that we have not characterized. And imagine that gets into man when we don't do anything about it. We must check the origin of this virus. Where did it come from? From bats, from pangolins, so that we can do a comparative study to determine, where things may have gone wrong. That's also very, very important. We must critically develop a health sector and then the research institutes. The universities are important in this. Several centers are important in this. We found that when the thing blew in Nigeria, we were all caught hands down and unprepared. And we're having this problem that we have currently because we started a bit later than we should have started. We must look at the human immune system and its ability to fight the virus and all that at genetic level. We must look at the human virome. I just said that. Taking sample swabs from the nostrils and then the mucosa, and then see what is there. Because the virome also plays an important role in either attenuating the effect of the virus when it gets in, or making sure that you come to full-bloom diseases.
So, which means that even if you are not symptomatic, you don't have the disease yet, that should still be checked.
Oh, of course,
to be able to differentiate you from those who are.
Yeah, because it tells you something different from what you have seen. You know, what you call the placebo in medicine.
Right.
Yes, you give some drugs and then you give some water to just see, you know.
If the drugs are the ones making the difference, or maybe there's something else.
Or their psyche, yes. I mean, that's also very important. Several areas of challenges. I mean, the herbal sector, for instance, there are claims and counterclaims that have not been put to test. I believe that the solution to all this may lie in herbs. The boosting of the human immune system is also very, very important. We must do all that is possible to make sure that our immune system is prim and proper at all times. Because a proper immune system, to a large extent, can fight diseases and then make sure that it doesn't come up. One very important thing is the use of bioinformatics, drug discovery, drug design, based on the genome of the virus and the human genome. Using pipelines, for instance, bioinformatic pipelines, you can design drugs that will actually fight the virus and then make sure that the full-bloom disease does not come to fore. These are some of the things that we can do. All right, then. Thank you very much, Dr. Olushola Ashobeku, for this unique perspective to this matter. Thank you so much for joining us on COVID-19. Now, as we battle with finding solutions to this pandemic that we have dealt with, the issue of daily sustenance and daily living continues to be a challenge for many. Now, some residents of Ikorodu in the nation's commercial capital, Lagos, who live below the poverty line of $2 a day, have complained of the level of hardship they currently face with the 14 days extension of the lockdown order in an effort to contain the spread of COVID-19. They say it has become increasingly difficult to feed their families. Our correspondent Gimba Omar reports on two of such families.
Filth litters the streets in this area of Ikorodu. People here not complying with the physical distancing guideline. They look on helplessly and don't appear to trust anybody at this time. A father of four sits outside as he tunes the radio for news on COVID-19 and the arrival of government representatives for food during the extended lockdown with no luck. Houses like this are common, meant for the poor. Here, the facilities are meager, a common corridor with electricity for the single rooms that face each other. The 63-year-old guides me inside where he lives. A television set, a couple of batteries are the most prized of what he owns. His daughter lies on the mattress studying. Life for him under the lockdown, he says, has turned for the worse.
But you told me that you are earning 500 naira per day. Has that changed?
For that 2,000, if you resort 500 and you go again, whether you go stay again or you come and resort to 500, so as you go make it to go and buy another one. Because the other one is for feeding.
Unusual uncertainty looms for both the young and the elderly in a state that could be best described as depressing. 2 streets ahead, an uneducated single mother of 2 lives with her aged mother. She was seen washing green spinach for lunch as their resources depletes. She also ushers us inside her room. Cheers television set where her lot as one of her kids, a 2-year-old, sleeps on the floor. She, however, prefers to speak outside. She hopes help will come, and fast.
Do you consider yourself as being part of the vulnerable, the poor of the poor, since you earn just 1,000 naira per day?
I will not tell you that I'm rich. You cannot compare me with people that they are having more than maybe 50,000, 100,000 a day. So, government know the way they can do it that can reach us. They should just go maybe house to house, or they should give counsel. I don't think that that's the best for now. Maybe they just go to house. Ask how many people is staying in this house. They will tell you, we are so in number. Then you drop what you have.
Households like these are perhaps considered most vulnerable and a target for government's palliatives. It appears, though, that this pandemic has only compounded the problems faced by this group of people, and they can't wait for this to be over so that they can have their lives back.
There are several families in there, as there are in other places in this area. Their major challenge is how to feed, how to take care of their loved ones. That's a major challenge which they will face for the next couple of days at least. Gimba Umar for Channels Television News.
Let's go still in the North Central Zone, but this time to Nasarawa State, where our correspondent Halima Gayam is standing by with this evening's update. Well, I'm told that we're still waiting on Halima. Now, let's go to Katsina. This time, I hope we have Katsina, where there is something to be said about palliatives being distributed between the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants, and IDPs, who have been distributing this relief materials like food items, clothing, and medicals to internally displaced persons living in Dutsima and Safana local government areas.
As you are aware, Mr. President is very concerned about the well-being of our IDPs. As such, he has made it very clear to all the agencies operating within the humanitarian space, that is in the humanitarian space, to pay special attention to them, especially in these trying moments. As the agency that is mandated to provide care and maintenance, we will continue to do our best to make their lives better. It may interest you to know that we have over 290 IDP camps in Nigeria, with a population of about 2.3 million people. Obviously, government cannot do it alone. The resources are stretched.
All right, thanks for being with us. That report, of course, from Katsina, the distribution of palliatives in Katsina. Joining me in the studios now is Dr. Doyi Odubanjo, who is a consultant public health physician. Thank you so much for coming in.
It's a pleasure being here.
Now, the second phase of the lockdown, so much has been said about it already. But there are those who say it's good. There are those who say, well, there are other challenges. But in your own general opinion, what do you make of it? What can it achieve, the second 2 weeks?
Well, I think largely we are beginning to achieve what we need to. We're beginning to see more tests being done. We're beginning to find more cases, from going door to door. And in fact, there are even more initiatives, community initiatives to find more people and get more people tested. And I think above all of that is the fact that more people will get to know what is really going on. Because that is, utterly important, because except the people know what's going on, you start losing their cooperation. And when you do, you can't find the cases you're looking for.
Now, there are those, of course, who are saying that the not being 100% compliant with the lockdown will make this task significantly more difficult? That because with people continuously moving around and intermingling in markets, at bus stops, in exercises, joint jogging and all of that in the morning, that you're still going to have this community transmission going on. So it's like it's a catch-22 situation.
Almost. But let me actually say that the lockdown is not an end in itself. That's what we need to get right. You know, especially dealing with a virus like this, whereby most people are asymptomatic. It means you are really not likely to find every single person, you know, who has it. But what you want to do is limit the spread as much as possible. So you don't get it's not the 100% compliance per se. You need the compliance as much as possible. Otherwise, you're wasting time. But I think even also above that is the fact that we have differences, too many differences in how we are trying to handle it across the country.
You're talking about the coordination between the federal and state governments
and the states too, you know, generally state to state. I mean, Lagos is locked down. Ogun was supposed to be locked down along with Lagos, but it started its lockdown
by 5 days.
By 5 days. So what happens? Does Lagos open before Ogun and all of that? You know, so all of that discordant.
And then across the country, you have a situation where some states are locking down, some states are relaxing the measures, and then reimposing it.
Exactly. So what would be the situation? If we reopen Lagos, would people come from Kano and reinfect in Lagos? You know, so it has to be thought of very, 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 very carefully.
Now, in terms of the link between what you just talked about in terms of the coordination and the opportunity for spread, I mean, if you take a state like Kano, Kano is expecting to be locked down in about 30 minutes. We've been told it's going to be complete and total and all of that lockdown. But already from one case, they've gone to 5 cases and 12 cases, and now about maybe a lot more than that.
21,
21 cases, you know, all in the space of several days. What would you be asking for in that regard? Is it more national coordination?
Possibly? Absolutely. We need national coordination that ensures that first, all of us know what our plan is, a joint plan. You know, when are we doing a lockdown? Is it a total lockdown? Is it a partial lockdown? What are the exemptions to the lockdown? When do we do the lockdown? When do we reopen? You know, we need to think about it. It's not casual. You know, but like I said earlier, the biggest mistake would be to think that a lockdown is the answer all in all. That just lock down and we'll be fine. No, because we'll have to reopen. Yes. Someday, sometime. We can't stay locked down forever. You know, so we really have to think through this thing and have a joint plan that we're following as a nation. And otherwise, even the interaction among the states will make it fail. You know, once you reopen Lagos, Lagos is connecting, and Abuja connects the whole country.
That's right.
So people are going to come in and out of those places. So the good effort that you are putting into Lagos may be reversed if we're not careful. So we need to sit down all in all and know that no state is an island. Everybody has to talk to everybody else and have a uniform plan.
Now, let's come to the health practitioners themselves, those who are actually interacting with the patients.
Right.
Sadly, we are now getting cases of loss of medical personnel themselves. There was one in Lagos, and there have been reports of others actually contracting the disease. Now, that brings to mind the issue of their protection, their welfare, even while they are in these front lines. Do you think the situation has improved from when we started, maybe about a month or so ago, in terms of their access to what you call PPEs?
Well, I can best say I hope so. And I would like to qualify that.
Please.
You see, I hope so in the sense that on some grounds it has improved. But now, for instance, we're talking about the fact that patients are showing up in private hospitals. You know,
which is against the current rules and guidelines.
It is against it. But again, we must never forget it, that whether knowingly or unknowingly, they will show up there. They could go there because they have what they think is typhoid, or they could go there because they have hypertension, and yet the man also has COVID. You know, so they could go there because they are pregnant. You know, so anything can happen. So there's no way we can work these things out without involving the private practitioners very seriously. And that means also then they will also have to have some PPEs. It may not be as many as a designated treatment center, but they will also have to have some of it because the first contact with the patients must be assumed to be, every patient must be assumed to be a COVID patient. That's the rule they should follow. And in assuming that, it means either they're not going to contact the patient or have any contact, or whoever is going to have that first contact would have to be very well protected. So the PPEs now, whether we have enough for all of those centers, I don't know.
Okay, which is why you qualified your statement.
Exactly.
Now, that brings me to the issue of the testing, because that's part of what people have been talking about, that we may be faced with higher numbers if we did more testing.
Right.
Other countries of comparable levels with Nigeria have done a lot more testing than Nigeria has done. And conversely, their numbers are significantly higher. Do you think that that might be our case if we ramped up the testing to the level that we ought to?
That's the expectation, especially now that we have made the pronouncement that we're in community transmission. That means it's spreading faster and in ways that we can't quite predict. And as you increase the testing, basically you are going to be finding the people. Remember again that most of them are asymptomatic. And one of the things that I think needed to have changed really largely was the way it's reported in the media.
Okay.
So I like what I see on your screen. I like the fact that you put active cases. I like the fact that you put discharge cases, because every time you report there are 407, that's all people remember. They think there are 407 people running around and everybody's getting scared and all that. But knowing that, no, the active are 200 and something, that's good. Telling us that actually people have recovered.
Been treated and been discharged.
They're fine. So you are dealing with many issues just by that one singular act. And I think that ultimately we're in that place where, we'll get more cases. That's what we expect. If we don't, we should be surprised. If you have more door-to-door case finding, you have more testing, and you expect to find more cases. The only thing is that we are thankful and we hope that we find the cases early. We hope that we find even as many asymptomatic perhaps as possible, but we should find the cases.
Are you not afraid that the health system may then be overwhelmed? Because in many places, the system was already fragile,
right?
And they're just about now ramping up in terms of putting in place the facilities. I mean, if you remove Lagos from the equation,
right?
In most of the other states of the Federation,
right,
they're only now just putting in isolation centers, building up the wards and all of that. So if there's a sudden influx of cases,
right,
they may then quickly get overwhelmed, both in terms of the personnel and even in terms of the equipment.
I can't agree more. But what I would say is that, therefore, the kind of coordination and aggression we're seeing in Lagos should be twice as much in all of those states.
They will say that they don't have the money. Which also brings me to how exactly you think the government at the national level should
right,
proceed to assist many of those states. I'll give you an example. The northern governors met about 24 hours or so ago.
Right.
And one of the things they came away with was that they couldn't afford to lock down their states
right,
economically,
right,
because they don't have the kind of resources to put together the kind of measures that will keep people indoors if you don't allow them to go out.
Right.
Now, in that kind of practical situation, what does one do?
You should find an alternative, because like we said, it's wrong to think a lockdown is an end in itself. It's only a means to an end. So even the USA, which has the highest number of cases now, is talking about opening up. So it's not a sin or a crime to say, hey, we can't afford this. The question is, what can you afford? The question is, what strategy can you put in place that will be effective even without a lockdown? Because even the Lagos that is locked down can't be locked down forever. You'll have to unlock it sometime. The nation will have to open its borders sometimes, right, sometime, and perhaps soon. And all of those things we have to think about. When we do so, it's not because we have zero cases. And when we do so, it's not because there'll be no cases anywhere in the world, meaning we're still at risk of importation. But we'll have to do so because no nation can sustain a lockdown forever. So we have to find alternative strategies to say, how can we make this thing work? If we mop up now, what effective strategy would we put in place to ensure we don't ever have to lock down? Again, hopefully, and yet we'll be able to track all cases and control the spread.
Dr. Doye Odubajo, that would be a good place for us to leave it. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Now, moving beyond our shores and first to South Africa, where our Bureau Chief there, Betty Dibia, has the latest number of confirmed cases, which is said to have risen to 2,605, up from yesterday's 2,506. The death toll from the virus is also up at 48. The positive news coming from there is that 903 people have also recovered from the disease.
With the confirmed cases in the country past the 2,500 mark, Gauteng province alone is the epicenter, contributing nearly 40% of the national tally. And Johannesburg as a city is a main contributor here. So today the Gauteng Provincial COVID Command Center outlined plans, they have put in place to increase the infection rate.
We have also significantly improved contact tracing. We have also scaled up capacity for screening, and we have increased the number of those who have been tested.
Door-to-door testing has been intensified in the province.
We are going to do it until the lockdown is uplifted.
Also, staff and patients at hospitals are being screened. A number of big private health facilities have been shut down as some staff and patients have tested positive. Same story for food giant Tiger Brands, which has shut down a Durban factory. Today as well, the National Command Council on COVID-19 briefed the nation on amendments to the lockdown regulations. These include that call centers of some companies can now operate. ICT service providers can now provide their services. Handymen and car mechanics can now resume services. The mining sector is also allowed to resume at about 50% capacity, provided health and safety measures are put in place for staff. Despite the raging debate, no alcohol sale is still allowed. In KwaZulu-Natal, where the COVID-related death toll is highest in the country, massive testing is underway. Health Minister Zweli Mkhize is taking that campaign as well to other provinces. Meanwhile, a probe has been instituted into the killing of a man, Colin Khoza, in Alexandra Township in Johannesburg, allegedly by members of the National Defence Force. The family of the deceased was visited by the Chaplain General of the SA Defence Force, Brigadier General Monwabisi Jamangile, who says that the death is regrettable, but the visit at this point is not an admission of guilt.
We have come here to the family to come and pass our heartfelt condolences to what has happened. This is not the admission of anything. This has got nothing to do with the investigations.
Today would have been the end of the initial lockdown before the 2-week extension, but Government Health Advisor Professor Salim Abdul Karim has prescribed that a daily increase above 19 per day would warrant a continuation of the lockdown. The last increase was 91, and government says no sudden end of the lockdown should be expected. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
And from the global update there, we go to the Middle East. And our correspondent, Mayowa Adegoke, joins us now from Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Good evening, Mayowa, and trust you're keeping safe. What can you tell us about the situation in the UAE?
It's good to be here, and already it's morning here. Situation as of this moment, new figures that we have, yesterday, Thursday, 460 new cases were announced, plus 61 recoveries, unfortunately 2 deaths. These were announced on Thursday, so as of now we have total number of cases at 5,825, and the active cases at 4,298. Also, death toll in total is at 35, and recovery is at 1,095. Those are the figures we have at this moment.
Now, there's also the information that we're hearing here that workers' movements are being restricted within the Emirates themselves. Of course, you have the UAE, but within the UAE, there are different Emirates, but that workers' movements are being restricted within them. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's not just workers. For instance, in Dubai, there's a 24-hour restriction of movement ongoing. and this pretty much affects everybody who is not who is not considered an essential worker. Also, to go out, to step out of your building, just even on your street, you need to obtain a permit. And as of today, and the rules keep changing. So as of Thursday, the permit you could get every store, now the permit will be issued only once in 3 days for emergencies. And say you need to go get groceries, or you need to go to the hospital or the pharmacy. So these are the types of reasons they are considering. But if you're an essential worker, you're exempt from obtaining this permit because you work in an industry that is considered essential. Now, the movement of workers between Emirates, this largely affects laborers. So this is a new rule they put out for laborers who would move from one emirate to the other. Now that's been stopped. So you need to get, if for instance you work in construction, you need to get your laborers from the emirate where your site is located. So that's one new rule that's been introduced, and all this is just to curb the spread of the virus.
All right, then, Mayowa Adegoke, please stay safe out there. Our correspondent, Mayowa Adegoke, joining us on the line from Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And that's how we're going to end this COVID-19 special this evening. Thanks for being with us. Of course, please keep the videos and your messages on how you're treating yourself during this stay at home. The handles are on your screen there. Of course, you can also get through us through Channels TV, hashtag Channels TV. On behalf of the crew, thanks for being with us. My name is Ladi Akere Doluale. See you tomorrow.